All right, here we are in 12.19. I am Chris, and I'm very happy today that we have a very special guest, my friend from over a decade ago, Nate.
Hello.
And can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started playing League?
Sure. I moved back to the United States from the Caribbean in 2010, early 2011-ish. And my buddy Robbie at the time was like, "Hey, we should play this game." And so we got into it, and that was the end of season one, beginning of season two, maybe. And so we ground, up to level 30 at the time was the cap, and that let you play ranked games. And at some point, we met Chris online and started playing with him. And then over the years, liked each other's virtual company enough that we stayed in touch. And so took it like quotey fingers serious in the early years. I still have my silver trophy from season two somewhere in my account. And then, now I just troll and play like all the other randos that do non-competitive draft.
Oh, thank you. And then returning as always is my patch review duo partner, Jason.
Hey, awesome to be here for the Let's Turn All the Tanks into Glass Cannons batch. I think we've got a lot to talk about. Awesome to have Nate here. And just wanted to say Lashana Tova to everyone out there celebrating the Jewish High Holy Holidays.
All right, let's get right into this first change. And it is an interesting one for such an incredibly stagnant champion. Now, Nate, we were talking about this right before the video. Why don't you start us off with this first one?
Oh man, Blitzcrank has a I don't know, page of updates, improvements, new effects, like crazy. And Chris and I talked about how Blitzcrank has remained unchanged for maybe the entirety of League, especially at this level. But Blitzcrank, when you pick him, at least up until now, always felt like he was missing a button or an ability. Like he just didn't really feel like an entire champ. It's like, oh man, that rocket grab sure is cute. And you dunk some new person, and then they'd rage quit, or their team would mark them as leaver, even though they were still trying to play. Um, but yeah, I played one game since these changes. People were talking about it, but the Blitzcrank player was terrible, so I don't know if they helped or not.
What's
Yeah,
your
that's funny that you mentioned that. The first person I ever had knock me off my friends list was back in season three after I had gone into a Blitzcrank and got pulled and killed about 12 times that game. I noticed I was no longer on their friends list after that game. So it definitely is a new player ruiner. I think the last time he got any type of significant change, and it wasn't nearly as much of this, was back in season five or six, where they changed to Overdrive Works, where he gets much more bonus speed, but then he gets the slowdown afterwards. And really, since then, like you said, he's been pretty unchanged. Um, Even now, I don't think they're really changing anything at his core, in my opinion. I think it's really more like they're just trying to make him into more of a jungler. That's all that I really see from this, and I'll talk more about what I think about what they're trying to do in a second. But I don't think this is going to really change the way that he fights that much. Blitzcrank has never been one to try and follow you and hit you with a bunch of auto attacks. What do you think, Chrissy?
well, the first thing I look at this is I kind of thought of like Tom Kench, a support that is really good in the 1v1. And when I look at these as a low econ character, when I look at these changes, I immediately thought of that when he gets like this on hit magic damage. It's a great tool for like extra attack speed and stuff. And when I go down here and you see all of these extra kind of bonuses and hybrid scalings and stuff, it really opened up his build path. And the thing where his passive no longer has a cap, this is really going to make people want to think about actually maxing something other than his Q, because that's a lot of extra attack speed. And this removing this gate on his ultimate is really going to up his DPS. And the fact that he now has like more of an interaction with critical strike is kind of silly and funny as well. What else? Do you got anything else to say, Nate?
Um, yeah, just that the this stuff is good. We'll have to see like how it builds, how the items play out. I don't know. I know somebody had like a Divine Sunderer build and tried to go Blitzcrank top a few weeks ago. and people that are into that just super love Blitzcrank. And obviously he's good at like initiating fights if you can get a pick or something. But just yeah, I don't know if it'll be enough even with items for him to roll around a team fight just punching people when his two buttons are on cooldown because the cooldowns are still really long. As far as I can tell, they didn't get any shorter. So I'll have to wait and see, maybe.
Yeah, I don't think this will even come close to giving him solo lane potential. This is just a lot of nice stuff for him to have, like auxiliary strength outside of just his little combo that he's known for.
No, I agree with you. They're probably not going to be able to get him into a solo lane here. I don't even think they want to, based on what happened with Pyke when he was a solo laner. But they are clearly trying to make him into a jungler with the fact that he can attack a lot quicker. You obviously need consistent damage and clear in the jungle. The fact that he's specifically getting this bonus damage against minions and monsters. And I think they're trying to make him into a jungler.
Yeah, his gank potential would be.
His gank potential would be good. The problem is, I think that, and this has happened with a lot of the other champs that in the past they tried to make into a jungler. I remember like Garen, Darius, Morgana actually worked pretty well, too well. They had to revert some of those changes. But most of those other junglers they tried to make into a thing at the time just failed miserably. I think the reason for that is that junglers really need to have 1v1 potential and the ability to stick to people. There are very few junglers, Karthus being an example, that don't have that, and that can still work even reasonably decent as a jungler. I feel like you need to be like a Poppy, a Nocturne, someone who really can stick to the target you're going for. Because otherwise, if Blitzcrank gets invaded in his jungle, what is he gonna do? Grab them, pull them in, make it even easier to kill, punch, run away, maybe? If he's invading someone's jungle without help, what is he going to do, really? I just don't think he's going to be able to fight one-on-one. And even if he pulls you and punches you, if he isn't way ahead, you're just going to walk away from him. And then as he tries to chase you with overdrive, eventually it's just going to slow down, and you spam an emote and you walk away.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to like disagree with you. I really don't think this was intended to push him into the jungle. First of all,
You don't think they wanted him in the jungle here?
those
Okay.
other champions you mentioned, they have built-in non-ultimate area of effect abilities. Blitzcrank's clear would be utterly pathetic. In fact, he'd probably need Tiamat just to like make it by and pay the rent and stuff. What I just think that this is I forgot what I was gonna say, but yeah, I just think this is supposed to like make him more well-rounded outside of just core combo and stuff.
By giving him more damage against minions and monsters with every ability?
I think that was just kind of some cutesy thing they did so he could play around Dragon, probably.
Interesting. Okay. I see where you're coming from. It feels to me like it's more about trying to push him into the jungle, but I do see your point as well.
I used to do that joke for a while though, that like every new champ video, they'd always talk about the jungle potential. It was like Freak or whoever. And so,
Here's Yumi's jungle potential.
Yeah, and so they're like, you know what? We should just give him some jungle stuff because somebody out there really wants to jungle Blitzcrank.
Yeah.
Well, since this is kind of a small rework, like 0 out of 10, how much do you think this is going to help him, Nate?
Well, that's a kind of a dicey question. Any help is great for him. I don't like pushing him into relevancy to like if I look at like Nautilus is like one of my favorite like tanky supports. I think he'll still be pretty far away. But for him, I mean, it's all upside. I don't think any of it was really negative other than the mana cost on something went up. So for him, it's great, but I don't think it'll push him into like anything where I'd pick him still, you know?
Yeah, I'm of the opinion that all this is a plus, but I don't think his role is going to change anywhere in any way.
No.
Yeah, especially at support, I'd probably give it like a 2 for helpfulness. I think it's a very slight help to him. Even the fact that he lost a little bit of knock-up duration is almost enough to compensate for all the positives at support.
The thing that sticks out to me the most is the huge attack speed bonus and the on-hit magic damage. I think we may be sleeping on that. I think that that's
there's a
a
couple of years ago when people would run Leona AD as support in lane and just smash people, and it was just because of a few small changes, and then they dialed them back. and the pro scene, had exploited it for a month or two or whatever.
Yeah.
You mean the
So-
old Transcendence effect on her ultimate?
No, it was before
Yeah.
Ultimate. It was even like level 2 in lane. I think it was maybe her AD ratio is too high or something, but
Monster.
people just roll up with Conqueror and just slap the shit out of the other lane. So we might see that, and if somebody figures out the code. But with like seeing like Amumu supports and stuff, like I don't think he can hang.
I just feel like Blitzcrank has too hard of a time sticking to his core after he pulls him.
Sure. Well, even once he misses with the rocket grab, you just beat him up. Like you just
Mhm.
bully the other people.
Yeah,
And
I think
it has
Pike
such
is
a long
still
cooldown.
I think Pike is still going to be a lot better at doing most of the things Blitzcrank would do.
Oh yeah, Pike is. I think Pike's busted, honestly.
Yeah.
All
Sometimes,
right,
yes.
let's move on to Echo. And these are some really powerful changes, in my opinion, for a champion whose kit is already extremely potent, both in like the laning phase, pick potential, clear, everything. I honestly think these buffs are pretty monstrous and undeserved, especially for the two things they chose. His passive is already like super devastating with like Lichbane and stuff, and I don't mind the fact that they buffed his ultimate too much, as it's incredibly like inconsistent to get the damage component, much like Nunu's ultimate.
Mm.
What do you think, Nate?
Yeah, I almost always see him use his ult to not die versus dunk an entire team. But those are not small numbers. I mean, it's not nothing. But yeah, he is super good, like you said, at every phase of the game, and also that kind of skill ceiling is really high for Echo players. That if you did put a lot of time into him, you can really embarrass people. So yeah, I don't know if he needed any buffs.
You're absolutely right.
I agree with you guys. Yeah, I think a lot of these changes are going to be win more in a lot of games. Just in the sense that Echo can already kind of burst most champs in the game with a full combo. If Echo gets a little bit behind, these changes are probably going to be the biggest help to him, where he will still be able to burst, whereas in the past he would have just had a very hard time, even with a full combo, even with hitting the Chrono Break, finishing, somebody who's built 400 HP. So yeah, this will probably make it a little bit easier for an Echo who gets behind to stay relevant in the game.
All right, next up to Fizz, and I gotta kind of echo my sentiments from my last one, right? Except this one I feel even more stronger about, because this is specifically a giant buff to like his actually like cornerstone uninteractive skill that's purposely supposed to be like uninteractive. This is like other than Flash, it's impossible to dodge the damage from this ability essentially. This is his invulnerability thing. If you guys
When he
want
jumps on top of the stick.
Yeah,
So is it the damage when he comes back down?
yeah,
It's the 90%
And
from
we-
75.
yeah.
Yeah, and to be clear, they're calling this a change to playful here. It's also a change to trickster, which does the same amount of damage. So whether he hops and then comes right back down in the same spot, or hops and then hops again, wherever he lands, he's dealing this damage. 90% AP now.
Yeah, that's a big jump up. Not to
Yeah.
mention that ability is so good. That's criminally good sometimes. Where you'll have somebody will use their dash to close the distance, and he goes up and then comes down on them and does a lot of damage before this upgrade. So yeah, probably not needed in my experience of Fizz players.
Yeah,
That know what they're doing.
it's to say nothing to the fact that his Q and W are also largely uninteractable as well.
Yeah.
You
I
have
feel like his
anything
play
to-
rate has probably been pretty low recently. I haven't seen too much Fizz, and I don't know if that's because he's in a weak place. Doesn't seem to me like he's in a particularly weak place, just that he doesn't get played that often. And I agree. Like, I don't think that he really needed this, but maybe they just want to push more players to get back into playing Fizz rather than some of the other assassins mid lane like Talon, who's seen a lot of play recently.
He's certainly not in a weak place. He is difficult to like not make a fool of yourself in like the late
Yep.
game. It's harder and harder to find those opportunities to leverage his extremely potent abilities in the late game. A lot like Zed, who's a powerhouse
Yeah.
during the same phase of the game that Fizz is.
That's a fair point. I think they're good analogies for each other.
For sure. And with Fizz's kit, you can tell whether it's the opposing team or your own team how good your Fizz player is after watching them for like 10 seconds in a team fight. Or
Oh,
like,
yeah.
oh, they don't know. Or you're like, oh, it's always the other team that has the good one, of course. But it's like, no,
Always.
it's like that's exactly how you do that. Good job,
No.
buddy. I'm glad for you.
Yeah, it's the Q usage. It's the damage
Yeah.
versus the mobility. Yeah. All right, let's move on to Garen. And I'm not really happy to see this because when you make changes to this kind of thing, this is when all of the giggled cheese lord Garens come out of the woodwork. And
yeah.
I'm talking about Gale Force Garen, and you're gonna see it after this for sure. And I've done it once myself. It is super cheesy, and increasing like the multiplier on this, I feel like it's just gonna get Garen further away from like his kind of off tank bruiser s style, and that's not the kind of thing I like to see for Garen. I do like Garen, and yeah, I'm not too happy about this. What's your thoughts, Nate?
Yeah, anytime I see the sort of damage focused Garen, it's obnoxious, whether it's my team or the other team. So yes, similar agreement, and yeah, I don't think it was needed. I just think the kind of DPS Garen does fine if you know what you're doing. That he didn't need more motivation to play that way.
Yeah, I was in 158% agreement with Chrissy, and now I think I'm in about 175% agreement with Chrissy. Um, this is
Nice.
ridiculous. This is ridiculous. They're really. I hated the moment they changed him so that Judgment could critically strike at all. I really liked Garen during the days where he was a juggernaut instead of like some glass cannon that's supposed to fly at you. They've even been trying to push the game away from mobility, so I don't see why not go back to making more of a juggernaut. Instead, they're saying, please make him go glass cannon all the time. This is a little bit silly. I think it's going to be very good for the people building crit on Garen, right? You mentioned Gale Force. I think that's probably going to be a popular item on him. I think Shield Bow might also be popular if you can get mobility from elsewhere.
Yeah. Keep in mind, this is essentially giving him the bonus that Infinity Edge gives him now, already just built into his kit.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty nuts. And if Garen ever like top lane gets a few kills or gets an early lead, he can just dunk other lanes when he shows up. There's not much you can do with him if he gets kind of out of
I feel
control.
like Mhm.
So like more of that, great, awesome. Love
That's
it.
true. You still can with some champs try and kite him and actually successfully do so, depending on how he's building, I guess. If he's running Ghost Ignite Dead Man's Blade or something, you're probably screwed. But yeah, I don't know. Garen used to be a champ that really, the Q, the E, the R all seemed useful. That really seems like, the E is the most useful thing. Obviously, the W has been, improved over time to be useful. I liked old Garen more.
I think the silence is still pretty core to his kit.
It is, but I feel like it does so little damage, and it's just so easy to stick to them with Judgment now.
No, it does a lot of damage.
Yeah, it does a reasonable amount, especially if you're building like all AD and crit and, ignoring your tankiness.
What I would
I don't
mind
know.
seeing is if they gave his judgment like a tank incentive, like some scaling off of like his armor, MR, or health or something, to give him another incentive to increase it through other means and not just critical strike and damage,
Similarly, you could just increase the damage per tick and get rid of the crit capability.
Well, then it'd be basically guaranteed. I don't think you'd want that.
I see what you did there.
Yeah. Okay. Next, we're going to scroll all the way through these 27 Janus skins down to Jinx.
Mhm.
And this is a pretty monstrous buff for one of like the strongest abilities in the game, like right when you get it, in my opinion. This is like has the potential to do much more damage than even Ezreal's ultimate, which has like the highest base amount. And this is just the flat amount. This doesn't factor in all of the missing health damage. So I don't know how you guys feel about this, but this feels like a pretty big overreach to me. This is already extremely potent.
Yeah, I would submit that if I've ever dodged a Jinx rocket, it was probably not intentional because it moves extremely fast. And so when you're like backing behind your turret or you're like running up the lane and like running at an angle so it doesn't hit you, it's gigantic and does an unreal amount of damage already. So great. Should probably just like face you with the rocket to open the fight, like in the 2v2. Just because it's so much. Like why not?
That's funny. Yeah, what's really annoying is when you actually manage to dodge it by a few pixels and then it hits one of your allies and
Oh
and
yeah,
and,
yeah.
and clips you anyway.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I don't think this is nearly as big of a change as Chrissy does, though. This is so the as far as I know, the execute damage is completely unchanged on this. So this is basically saying that if she's up close, she's only doing 5 more damage to you, or 10 at level 16. Even if she's firing from halfway across the map, she's only doing 50 more damage to you, or 100. It's usually the execute that's going to do most of the damage on this. I actually feel like increasing your base AD by 2 is probably just as big as the Death Rocket change.
Well, I think you might be kind of underestimating the initial strength of this compared to comparable ultimates, and the phase that of the game that she unlocks is how potent it already is. I think it is really strong, and
Ability.
no one really uses it to open up the fight ever since they nerfed the hell out of people doing that a long time ago.
Hmm.
So one thing I also like to say is I think this ability has the absolute worst hitbox in the entire game for the animation.
It's up there.
It's like two Teemos left or right of the animation and still hits you, I think.
It's pretty big. I think Lux is the only one that was as
Yeah.
bad, and I think they kind of corrected that
Yeah,
recently.
but that one's animation is much more closely relatable to its hitbox.
You could be completely outside of it and still get hit. But yeah, I agree with you that Jinxar hitbox is pretty disgusting.
Okay, next up we have Kaisa, and this is pretty small, but nonetheless a pretty impactful change. This is really going to help the full AP people and want them to get away from the goofy like W max builds where they just send the thing down the lane like Timeless. This is it's really good, I think, and incentivize her to build more like into Nashers and hybrid and tank busting stuff. So I like this.
Yeah, I remember when Kaisa first came out, she went underwent some changes pretty quick because the AP build was too strong. And then some of the item changes over the years have also kind of messed with that, where people would do like the hybrid build, and then she pretty much just ended up as an AD carry. So yeah, anything that makes her more interesting, I'm for, and it's not a crazy like numerical shift. So yeah, I'm down.
Yeah, I agree with Nate. This is if you're going to try and make AP Kaisa builds into a feasible thing, which they're kind of hovering on the edge of right now. This is the way to do it. Force her to still get up close, reward the AP ratios. Love it.
Alright, next up is a champion very similar to the Blitzcrank changes, where it remains largely unchanged for like 12 years. Except this one, after his ultimate being 100% AP for like 10 years, they did finally drop it to 80, like about a year and a half ago, but now they're raising it back to 90. And I don't know how I feel about this, because I almost feel like when they dropped it to 80, his AP builds actually got way more popular because everyone was like, whoa, it was that high? Well, this is still pretty high
Yeah.
and low effort. And if there's anything in the league that's low effort, you can guarantee it'll be popular. So what do you what do you think about that, Nate?
So it's funny because I either play Malphite super tanky or I build a Trinity Force and just alt and auto their AD carry in the team fight and just delete them before they land. I can't stand AP Malphite as like a Malphite stan. Just because like he comes in, he like eats one dude and then dies immediately. And you're like,
Yeah.
cool, cool. That was real great. Either team he's on, like just is obnoxious. I guess if you were like, I'm gonna play mid and be like the AP carry, and played Malphite that way, that'd be fine. But it's always top lane, and then your team doesn't have a tank because you thought you had a Malphite. So I don't think he needed the damage increase, but it will just encourage people. It'll be more AP Malphite players, which is not what I want in the world.
Yeah, I sometimes go AP Malphite mid with Ludens. I've actually just had more success building him full tank anyway, even when I'm mid lane. But yeah, I don't know. Do we really need to be encouraging AP Malphite right now? We really need to be encouraging a non-tank Malphite on a champion that's designed to benefit from armor and basically be the hard counter to lots of AD. This seems very weird to me. I know that it's not as high of a ratio in Unstoppable Force as it used to be. We're trying to move it up on Thunderclap. It's still pretty high AP ratios. And I don't know. Can you guys think of any like items besides maybe like Rift Maker that have tankiness and AP? I mean, I'm not going to count Banshee's Veil because that doesn't have any armor for Malf.
True.
I guess Zanya's, right? But besides
Yeah.
those two,
Yeah.
so it doesn't seem like they're trying to split the difference here. It just seems like they're trying to like, throw a bunch of like a bunch of like trolley kids into saying, "Oh, I can do AP Malphite now."
Yeah, and the Thundercloud might be for laning too, because sometimes you can get bullied as just Malphites. Older champ doesn't have like the super kit some of the newer champs. But yeah, I can't
Right.
imagine there's a great justification for any of it.
Yeah, and it's just not going to help the Malphites who are building properly.
No.
Well, one thing I would like to bring up, I like how you brought up getting Trinity Force on him, and I just like to say that I actually do the exact same thing, and I've been doing that for many, many years, and the reason I started doing that is because I watched Nate do that in a game where I think he was jungling with Malphite or something.
Yeah.
And I've been a fan of
It's
that ever since.
it's hilarious. Like when you like say they have a Vayne in the back line or whatever, and you ult in, you try to hit all of them if you can, but you just ult, their champ that's doing the best. And if you click the E, like they literally die before they land because you auto them on the way down, and it's just laughter after that. Like who cares after that? You've already won. It's victory.
That's awesome. I've never even heard
Yeah.
of that build.
Super funny.
I don't think the burst is quite that 100 to 0 potential, but it is very potent still while maintaining a lot of tankiness.
It would also give you the opportunity to stick to them a little bit, right? Because it has the rage passive.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
still gives movement speed.
Yeah,
And the
so
thing
that
with,
sounds pretty cool.
yeah, you don't really lose much in the way of tankiness because his W passive gives him so much armor. So
Nate, that's
Oh.
genius.
It's a good time. You just have to be careful that, like, if you're top, for example, that if you're trying to build that first, sometimes if you're against like a Jax or some other asshole's just gonna keep jumping on your face. It's like, all right, let me get 18 armor items, and then we'll
Yeah.
build the Trinity Force for later.
yeah, the early game's always tough. All right, next up we have Master Yi. He's one of those champions I'm not a huge fan of, so I'm pretty happy to see this because no matter what do they do to this champion, he always still seems to chop everyone the hell up.
The one thing I know about Master Yi is if the game goes long enough, he becomes relevant, no matter how poorly he is done. It's
Oh,
just
yeah.
the passive gold generation will make Master Yi S tier by the end of the game if it goes past like 40 minutes. And it's really obnoxious because if you're jungling or whatever, and you're like, man, I really stomped that Yi this game, and then he shows up and gets a quadra kill or something, you're like, oh, I guess the game went long enough that it didn't matter anymore. There's a couple champs like that, and he's at the top of that list, I think.
Well, you are right, but I think that the part that's truly cancerous is how he doesn't really have to wait to the late game, and he can play really, really poorly in the early game, and all he has to do is show up late to a team fight, and he does
Oh, yeah.
clean up just so
yeah.
easily. And the new like interaction between him and Dustblade, I just think it's criminal. It's just elevated him to like a really just aggravating status.
Mhm. And his skill cap is so low to be like competent that
Yeah.
like the second time you play him, you're like, I've got this guy figured out.
Yeah, they definitely make it very unpunishing to play him if you're not skilled. You can still have a lot of success.
Mhm.
So what we've got here is about 5 AD off at level 18, and then a slightly lower AD ratio in Wuju style. Literally no change to him at level 1. He will act exactly the same way that he always has. To me, this is like they've given like Yi like 3 5-star meals in the last few patches, and now they're like taking away the breath mint at the end. This really isn't gonna hurt him at all, really. And I agree with you guys. Like Yi is one of those champions that no matter how bad you do all game, you will still be relevant and super impactful later on. And the only thing that'll really make a difference is, do you completely suck at Yi, like most of the people out there in solo queue, who try to use their Q to engage a fight, without letting somebody engage first? Or are you a Yi that's smart enough to, to wait until some of the cooldowns have been used, some of the CC has been used, and then run in and clean up everyone, basically becoming unstoppable? And if you're that second type, nothing is going to stop you, not even if you get bullied early game.
Yeah, the good ones are the ones that don't build like 5 damage items.
Yep.
You're in trouble
Right.
you're in trouble if you play against like the Sterix, Warmogs, Thornmail ones. Those are the good ones.
Pretty
Oh
much every
right.
time I see Yi in a solo queue game, it's just about like, please let him have one brain cell. Please let him have one
Yeah.
brain cell.
Yeah.
And usually in the early part, it looks like they don't, and sometimes later on, they reveal themselves to have a few
Yeah.
brain cells.
Come back around. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just ban him every game. I don't want to play against him, and I don't want to play with him. It's just frustrating. It's just not
Mhm.
fun.
He's a popular band for me too.
Yeah. Next up, we got Nasus, and this is an absolutely titanic change here. This is kind of a throwback to about 7 or 8 years ago when his Wither actually applied 100% of the cripple equal to the slow. Then they dropped it to 50 for many years, and now they're upping it back to 75 now. And like the current atmosphere of League now, where things kind of move a lot faster, this is going to be so insanely powerful in like the lane now. And Nasus has gotten like a slew of huge buffs over time, and I can only think the reason is because the game like snowballs harder and harder. They think he needs to reach his like farming power spike faster and faster. So they keep giving him more tools like every 6 months. He's in an absolutely just insanely powerful state right now. He can stack so much faster than he could for years. He's gets so many buffs with his ultimate. They did cut down on some of his sustain like earlier, but he's still just a powerhouse with like Sundera and stuff like that.
Yeah. For sure. And like it's funny that talking about Yi into Nasus, that he's another champ that if the game goes long enough, he's relevant, but usually you have to have a lot more skill, at least more than Yi, to get your stacks up in lane, whatever. Because if you did a bad job for the first half of the game, you won't matter by the middle of the game. But if you do a competent job for most of the game, yeah, he's just terrifying.
Mhm.
But the good news for me is that I've played so many games as Nasus in my early years that when I lane against him, I have a little more savvy of at least keeping his stacks down, even if you never kill him. Kind of to time your harass, etc. But yeah, he's just gotten stronger over the years that I have not been playing him as much.
Yeah, I mean, finally a Yi counter. 75% cripple. But
He's actually immune to cripples when he's in his ultimate.
oh, I know it says he can't be slowed. He's immune to the cripple as well.
Yep.
That somehow adds up.
he,
Pretty good.
he definitely is. I've looked into this.
Oh, that's brutal. That is brutal.
Yeah.
That's not a Yi counter at all, then. Yeah. So it's the bonus attack range on Siphoning Strike went up. Wither, the cripple went up. They didn't take anything away from him, did they? The bonus size on Fury of the Sands can be good or bad, but it's kind of cool that you get the higher damage radius now.
No, this
Yeah.
is just going to make what he used to be, a champion that was a very risky blind pick who had a plethora
Yes.
of super punishing matchups.
Counters.
And as time has went on, he is just like, by the time he gets to 6, he's ready to go all in, no matter how punishing the person he's laning against, whether it's like Olaf, Trundle, Pantheon, some of the classic ones that give him a super hard time and stuff like that. And Teemo? That one's
the
that
old
one's not
days,
so bad. That one's not so
You
bad.
blind him every time he lights up the Siphoning Strike on the Cannon Creep. Oh man, he'll just sit in the fountain after a while.
There's a point at which you can just chase down the Teemo
Yeah.
and kill him.
Oh yeah, that happens eventually.
Teemo's
That's
not
every
that bad.
Teemo game.
But in solo queue, there's going to be like a 60% chance that the opposing laner was like an insta lock Kiana top or something anyway. So you don't even need to worry about being countered there.
Yeah,
But
I'd say the itemization of the game has just supported him so much that some of the early items just let him
Yes.
farm, like the way that cooldown ratios, are now ability haste, all those things that you can just keep that queue going forever and you never run out of mana.
That is true. To some extent, the itemization has also hurt him, though, and I think that may be why he's gotten so many buffs recently. Chrissy, I agree with you that it was also probably because the speed of the game is faster and he doesn't have as long to scale. But I think it's also, to some extent, because you have items like Divine Sunder, Kraken Slayer in the game that really can be anti-tank. And, Nasus in the old days, if he got ahead, he was just so freaking hard to kill. And he's still hard to kill, but at least there's the tools to do that now.
Sure.
That may be why they feel like he's needed buffs. I personally feel like he doesn't need buffs.
Yeah, you make a really good point there, Jason. I do think his early to mid game has become like almost like insurmountable to like pushed behind unless he just cannot farm like that golden like 400 to 20 minutes. But what you said I think is absolutely true, where in like the Supreme late game, I do think he actually does kind of struggle a bit, as you know, it takes time for him to like walk his slow ass around and Q a bunch of times, and in the late game things happen very fast and all the extra true damage is in the game now. I don't actually think he's as good in the late game, but when he like snowballs and like in the early and mid game, he is just as insane as he always was.
Oh yeah,
Sure.
you know they call him a raid boss for a reason. Sorry, Nate, to cut you off.
Oh, very good. Just and also the if he split pushes, like his Q damage to turrets and things is just it
Yes.
gets to be unreal. We're like, oh no, we got 2 hits on it. Never mind. Yeah, it's gone now. And so yeah, I think but yeah, if he's like your primary tank, since his only CC is single target, that yeah, you can just kind of run away from him. But if your team has enough CC where you can go in and drop a few Qs on these squishier targets, he's a real problem.
Yeah, he's one of my favorite champs to like not blind pick but counter pick into. He's really good against other tanks and like stuff, really silly stuff like Gangplank and Alawi, where he can farm off of their like barrels and tentacles and free stuff like Yorick and the ghouls. All the nonsense. He has a few really goofy matchups that he's redonkulously powerful into right now. All right, next up, we got a really interesting change. And like some of the other changes on this list, this has been unchanged basically since day one of like the alpha. And this is just kind of hilarious that they would take this step to boost this to a massive 300. I'm actually not against it because its channel is like an incredible 3 seconds long. I'm actually okay with the risk reward of this gaining even more ridiculous levels of power.
If you would have told me before today that Absolute Zero had 1,000% AP ratio, I'd have been like, yeah, it probably does, because people immediately notice when they're walking toward a bush and they're getting slower, even though you can't see the animation, and they leave. Like, it's so hard to land this on anyone other than maybe the other team's tank. So, yeah, they can make that number whatever they want. It's fine with me.
I don't have a problem with it from a balance point of view, but again, like, you know, this is one of the few champions in the game that's in the jungle, that builds tanky, that can fulfill that role for your team. Why are we encouraging people to go full AP on him? Why are we doing this? Right, why are we doing this?
Another interpretation, you could say like one AP tank item now goes a lot farther, like just Demonic Embrace or something.
Yeah, I don't think most people look at it that way. I think most people are going to go full tank or full AP.
Yeah, it's definitely enticing. This is pretty funny to play around.
Yeah.
Saying like Nunu into those like we are talking about the Alawis, the Heimerdingers, where you can just like eat the things they're making, and snowball them over and over again. That, I mean, you're still not going to land the ult, but whatever. He's a little more salt, I guess, for the poor bastard that like flashed too close while you
Probably something like
they
that.
didn't know you were there.
The last couple of years,
Good
I've actually been playing him top a bit because his like Q sustain has become truly obnoxious. And, like way more potent than it was before his rework. And especially when he's under half health, it becomes like twice as strong or whatever. It's absolutely preposterous, and he can like hold it down against like the most annoying stuff like Darius or anything. So that's kind of fun to play top, I think.
God, I just wish that they were encouraging tanks to build tanky. It's just so many reasons to build all of these champions glass cannon. Meanwhile, you know, all the pro players know there's still a use in having 2 tanks on your team. And they're just encouraging such bad habits, I feel like.
I completely agree.
Yeah. Again, like balance-wise, I don't have any problem with this. It's encouraging bad habits.
Sure. And people at the end of the game, though, they're not proud of their assist numbers. You know, they want the kills. So even when they play a tanky champ, they're like, I need to, you know, dunk that damage on people.
Oh my god, as a support player, I get all the time, oh my god, you're 0-6, you must suck. Meanwhile, they're ignoring my 32 assists.
Right. Yep.
Like, oh, you've been carried all game.
Okie dokie. Next up, we have Rakan, and I'm not really a big fan of this champion. I think him and Bard kind of are really lackluster in terms of support. Tarek's really bad too right now. But I am really happy to see this champion get any buffs. He is more of like an engager. His like sustain and poke are like laughably pathetic. So this is always nice to see him get a little bit more love.
Yeah, I don't see him very much anymore. I remember, in the early days when people are still kind of learning his kit and all the tricks you could do with the, dash knockup game. Um, it's a little more interesting, but yeah, I just haven't seen him make an impact in a game in a really long time, so I support him getting help.
Yeah, this is not the type of help he needs though. Rakan is not an AP champion. He might pull a little bit of AP from things like his support item. But he's not an AP champion. If you're looking at something like the Fey Feathers, okay, so this is 85% to 95% AP for the passive shield that he gets when he hasn't been damaged for a little while. Sounds nice. But think about it. You could buy a blasting wand for 850 gold. That gives you 40 AP and the entire shield, not the increase here, but the entire shield that you'll get based on that AP is another 38 extra shield. That's nice. Or for the same amount of gold, you could buy a giant's belt and you get, I believe, 350, 380 extra bonus health, basically 10 times that amount. So if you're trying to get tanky, that there's a little bit of AP ratio from Fey Feathers isn't going to help you. The Gleaming Quill is just an AP ratio on the damage. It's not improving the ratio on the healing. I don't think this is really helping anything that Rakan's trying to do. Granted, you can do a little bit more damage if for some reason you're going AP when you're trying to burst someone. But in my opinion, this is not going to help him one bit.
Yeah, I agree. But man, if I ever picked up this champion, I would definitely go AP because, man, he is he just feels so unimpactful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I usually play him full tank with some speed items, just so I can get in, make the engage, hope my teammates can finish the job, and then get out alive. And that way, at least I don't hand over 300 gold for doing the engage.
Alright, next up we got Rek'Sai. Not something huge to write home about, but as kind of a champion that's more on the assassin end of bruisers, this is kind of a significant change for her. What do you think, Nate?
Yes, from 64 down to 61 base attack. I don't know how impactful that will be, jungling, ganking, etc. I don't know if that'll matter a whole lot. I'm sure the 1v1 engage, against the Lee Sin invading your jungle, it'll matter. But every other instance, yeah, I don't know what the mathematician at Riot was like. Yes, 3. It will be 3. I don't know.
I wonder how they work that out
Doc.
between 2, 3, or 5. It's never 4.
Right, right.
Oh, 5 would be devastating.
Yeah. This might be a little bigger than it looks, just in the sense that Rek'Sai is an early game jungler and really relies on being able to outdamage other champs early or to make the good ganks and finish off the kill. So base attack damage is really the worst place you could hurt her. With that said, like you just mentioned, it's just 3 AD. It's not taking off from her pathetic scaling. So at least she still has that pathetic scaling, and it's not even more pathetic. And I'm surprised they consider her strong right now. I consider her to be kind of average at best.
Yeah, I think she's average too. I think this is a bit of a bigger deal because if you know how her Q functions and how low of a cooldown it becomes, later on in the game she does become basically like a dedicated auto attacker. Her Q cooldown goes down to really low levels and she gets extra attack speed when she's spinning around and doing that special Q auto attack 3 times.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so I think this is a bit of a bigger deal, especially with her clear that this affects and stuff.
Who do you think is the better Void Monster Queen right now to play, Bel'Veth or Rek'Sai?
Bel'Veth's certainly 10 times more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And her late game
is
absolutely her late game's absolutely monstrous.
Yeah.
So definitely her, but I don't know. I think Rek'Sai brings more useful things to the table. I just think Bel'Veth is just a terror, though, undeniably a terror in the late game.
It's good analysis, I think.
Yeah. Bel'Veth's also really difficult to play and really easy to make a fool out of yourself on.
Yeah, that's usually
dash the wrong way.
Yeah, I'd say it's like 75% fool making, and then
Yeah.
25% like that's what that champ does. Awesome.
Welcome to Clown Town.
People have a tendency to build way too many like offensive items on her, and it makes her kind of like a liability, even though her damage is redonkulous. All right, next up to Rise, probably one of the most changed champions in the entire game. I'm not sure he needs this right now. He has a very kind of, in my opinion at the moment, a healthy kind of curve. Now that they've gated his like Q's bonus damage behind points in his ultimate, by the time he gets to 11, it's already pretty powerful. When he gets to 16, the bonus damage his Q does when they're marked with his E just becomes absolutely silly. And you can go like some more conservative AP off-tank kind of builds, and it's still like really strong. So I gotta say, I don't like this on his Q. I don't really care so much for the W on his Rune Prison because the base amount is really low, and this is like his highest cooldown ability.
Yeah, pretty similar sentiment, and yeah, Rise has changed so much since the early days. But I've not played a game where Rise was in it, my team or the other team, where I thought, man, that dude is not doing enough damage. Usually he's just like throwing 400 blue basketballs and then people die. Yeah, and using his ult poorly.
Yeah, you got that right, yeah. His ultimate
Yes.
is a bitch to make consistent use out of.
Oh yeah.
It's probably, I'd say his and Bard's, maybe Kindred, are probably some of the hardest ones in the game to use.
Sure.
You've got me kind of wanting a Dunkmaster Rise now. What do you guys think? This seems like a strange place to buff him on the AP ratio. Essentially, his late game scaling is what they're trying to make better. That's where he was already really good.
Yeah.
This is just AP ratios going up. I mean, at least they didn't hit the E. Which can hit a lot of different people, and a 5% change there might be huge. But what do you guys think? Like, was this the right place to buff him?
It'd be really silly to buff his E because the E only exists to serve as like a conduit to enhance his W and make his Q repeat over and over. So if they buffed his E, that's when things would really start getting into Silly Town because that thing's cooldown gets down to like 1.25 seconds or something.
Yeah.
Like that. And this already is probably a bit much. I'm going to say this for the same reasons I said they keep buffing Nasus. As the game keeps like accelerating to like these 20-25 minute wins over and over, champions like Rise, they need more to like keep pace with like the game and stuff.
The ones that need more scaling. Yeah, what do you think, Nate?
Yeah, I agree. And the game is so much faster. And some of the new champs, their kits are so dynamic where Rise just comes and just like unloads in your face. And then, that's his game. That's all he brings to the table. So they're like, oh, if that's what he does, he needs to do it really well because everybody else has 32 dashes and a few, iframe dodges and God knows what. So all these old timers from the original 40 or whatever have to just keep, just give them damage. Just give them damage,
Meanwhile, Cho'Gath is like, what do I do?
I actually think Cho'Gath's aged extremely well for an equally outdated kit.
Uh-huh.
Okie dokie, let's move on to Shyvana, and silliness abound going on right here. I don't know if you're super familiar with like the cheesiness of AP Shyvana, Nate. If you've
there was a season where I played AP Shyvana probably 50% of my games.
Oh, so
It
you're
was
one
years
of
ago,
those.
though.
You're one of those.
What the whatever the skill shot is, the circle when you're in dragon form, the flame breath, is it the other side of flame breath? Whatever it is.
Yeah.
Oh man, the first time someone did it to me, I was like, what was that? And then did some internet research and I was like, oh, AP Shyvana, like tell me more. Problem is when your ult's on cooldown or other times in the game you just get dunked on because you have no defensive items. But when it comes together, it's really silly. So
yeah. And they actually added some silliness into this even more so. With that being said, though, I am pleased that they also did some right by her and tried to help her kind of like on-hit build and her more like tank into Titanic Hydra kind of more standard build that she was known for years before she became just a complete tool of the Cheese Lords. So what do you think, Jason?
I think that they didn't really help the tanky build. The on-hit glass cannon build, sure. I like the bonus AD damage going up on burnout, but we're taking away from the maximum health ratio. We're adding AD and AP ratios. We're adding all this power to flame breath. Which is like you guys were saying, that's the skill that Shyvana hits you at 1300 range. from way out of your sight, way out of the team fight, and 90% you. Um, Now she's gonna 96% you. Extra AP ratio on Dragon's Descent, so even without the Flame Breath, she can do a lot of damage with that cheesy
Yeah.
AP build. This is the same thing I've been saying with, Nunu and some of the other champs that we were talking about. Like, they're just trying to get rid of all the tanky junglers, and I don't get it.
Yeah, with Nunu, I was perfectly fine because it's so like inconsistent and situational where he makes full
Yeah,
use of
that's
his
not the
ultimate.
biggest part of his kit. Yeah.
But when you have changes like this, I mean, literally all she needs to do is be next to you, and she's always going to get the drag on you with her ultimate. And this is just a monstrous buff from her ultimate. It's going to give her such an insane 1-2 punch that it just blows my mind that they keep pushing this direction. It makes me kind of conspiratorial that there's someone just in the right balance team that just really plays this a lot, because it's sad that I've seen this champion go in this direction, and they keep adding more and more and more incentives to for it to be built like this.
Do it like every 3 patches, and this is one of the most universally hated cheese builds by the
Oh
League
yeah.
community. There's a lot of cheese builds out there that people are like, oh, that's cute, it's kind of fun. AP Shyvana is just pretty much universally hated, except for by the people who play it, and have ridiculous success with it.
Oh yeah, and just to the kind of fun slash balance of the game, that even if you aren't great at AP Shyvana, if you build enough items, when you ult onto an AD carrier or somebody that doesn't have a lot of health, it just does an unreal amount of damage and doesn't take a lot of skill, because you can jump over terrain, you can do all kinds of stupid stuff with it. So
Yeah,
yeah, it's very disappointing when it happens to you, and you're like, oh yeah, I guess, all right, cool, I'll
Yeah,
watch the rest of the team fight.
this is to say nothing about the fact that they added AP ratios to her Q and her W that aren't mentioned here. It's just so silly.
This patch?
What?
This patch?
No, they're not mentioned here because they didn't change them. But they later not long ago, they added AP ratios to her other abilities that never had them.
Right.
So I don't know. It's just more silliness. All right,
Yeah.
Jason, why don't you take us away with the Sona analysis?
All right. So, Sona, in my opinion, has been doing quite well since the durability update. She's harder to punish in the early game, because she is one of those champs that used to have, and I guess still has, the one of the lowest HP totals at level 1, but that the HP total is a lot higher now. Now, what they did here, they figured that Sona needed a little bit of buffs, so they increased the base damage by 10 at all ranks on Hymn of Valor. And the power chord, if you basically use 3 abilities and then auto attack someone, with your last ability being the E, the speed boost, will now slow the target by 50% instead of 40%. For me, the Q is the bigger change here, and this is really nice for Sona because despite becoming better with the durability update, where she's less punishable, she also has a harder time actually punishing other champions that are not respecting her range at level 1, 2, 3. So to be able to do more damage to them really kind of helps you poke them down and poke them out of lane, or even if they don't show any respect whatsoever, along with your lane partner, just kill them in those early levels. This is really nice for Sona. One thing that I really like doing with Sona is not skilling the E until level 5 sometimes. Depends on the matchup. If I really need to play safe, I will skill the E at level 3. But often I go QW, QW, ER, and then max Q from that point. What do you guys think about these changes, Nate?
It's very similar to what you're saying. That I actually played a couple Sona games not that long ago, and man, every once in a while, maybe it's people don't see her that often. They'd come a little too close and eat a him and a power chord to the face, and
Oh yeah.
just light up some other support. The Song of Celerity, rarely do I do that one intentionally. It's almost always heal the team, him of valor, power chord, damage. Game over and over again. Going to the movement speed and slowing someone with an auto, like going into auto range to slow them. Usually you're trying to get away. So 10% more on that, I guess, cool. But I don't know if it's going to save anybody unless they're, very, very cognizant of that. But yeah,
Keep going.
I would say just, but I mean, help was awesome. I think Sona's cool and requires enough skill and is fragile enough that, I appreciate that kind of champ.
Yeah, she
in the
requires
support
almost
role.
no mechanics, but amazing positioning to play
Mhm.
well. One good thing about this change on Song of Celerity, if you speed yourself up and your team is kind of chasing someone down, you
Mhm.
can slow them down, and then the rest of your team can catch up.
Sure, sure.
Pass it on to Chrissy.
Yeah, I'm not quite as optimistic as you guys, and this is also like one of my OG favorite supports. It's just as time has like marched on, I just feel like, and the nerfs that she's gotten over time, I feel like she's just been left more and more in the dust. And I know that her whole kit revolves around like staying alive, so she gets to that like legendary spam factor of like using all of her abilities like a million times. I just feel like there's just way too many supports that do more potent things more often or just as fast as her now. And with the release of like Yumi and Seraphine, I feel like they've both made her completely obsolete. That's my
Okay.
take on it. I feel like
Yeah,
both of their
that's fair.
kits do everything that Sona does, but much better.
I still personally like her a lot. I think she's really good as long as you have a couple tanks on your team. Good luck getting those with this patch.
Yeah, I like her. I'd honestly love to just see an absolutely massive buff across all of her abilities, but they seem kind of determined to keep her at this kind of power level. I guess I'm alone thinking that she's in kind of an underpowered state right now.
There's a lot of people who think
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I wouldn't say she's like top 10 supports, but I think her playstyle's unusual enough that and people don't see it as often. Maybe that at the very top tier of players it won't affect them at all, but a lot of the kind of like mid-range, moderately competitive players will probably make some stupid mistakes or underestimate like how strong her heal is in a team fight, etc. But yeah, like the top level where everybody understands everybody's kit like to the letter. I definitely think she's weaker than a lot of the people you could pick.
All right. Let's move on to Syndra, and this is the most important part of this update where they tried to give her a bit of a mini rework. And I gotta just say, straight out of the gate, I think this is just an absolute flop of rework. I feel like all they did was pretty up like the text that she already had and then gated the buffs that she already got from maxing a skill behind another condition, which is something they do often to kind of like just dress up some kind of bullshit they like to release where they take away someone's like consistent power and then give it back to you but behind like another condition. And I feel like almost word for like all of her skills, that's exactly what she did. Now with that being said, she did release or receive a couple strong buffs in this. Let's first talk with the passive where she has to collect this new resource, these Splinters of Wrath, and if she maxes it out, she gets a whopping like extra Rabadon's death cap worth of AP, a whopping 15%, and that's probably what they thought was supposed to make up for all the other buffoonery in these changes, in my opinion. What do you think, Nate?
Oh man, the first thing when I was like scrolling through it, obviously there's just an unreal amount of words in this part of the update.
Yeah.
But the Dark Sphere, 7 seconds from 4 seconds, and it's like, oh, if you get enough splinters, you can hold 2 charges of it. It's like, yeah, but the few times I don't play a lot of Cinder, but the few times I do play her, I'm like, man, I wish I could do this queue more often, not half as often. I don't know how long it takes to get 40 splinters, but uh, yeah, I don't know if their early game is going to be much harder until you get the splinters, if it's going to be this sort of super long wait game. Um, but yeah, I definitely have to play with it because the penalties for not having the splinters yet are legitimate. They're not, it wasn't just splinters make you better, it's you start worse. Splinters make
Yeah,
you better.
that's the exact same thing I noticed too. My eyes, every time I refresh this to see if they like change any of these numbers at all, my eyes went to exactly what you said, Nate. This is just, it has to be similar to Karthus's Q for her to maintain the kind of threat that she has now in lane
Yeah.
before this rework. And to bump this up to 7, and I don't care if it only takes her 10 or 15 minutes to get those 40, that is like so much pressure that she is losing in lane that she has now. And,
And like amount of spheres matters too. Like it's
yeah.
where you're like, man, I wish I had like a dozen more spheres out to light people up with. Um, yeah, that seems brutal, but I guess I don't know yet.
What do you think, Jason?
Yeah, I'm not as down on this as you guys are. I think she's actually going to be a terror. Yes, the lane potential, the lane threat, definitely the early all-in kill threat is going to be much lower. Based on that cooldown changing from 4 to 7 seconds. But it's not only the fact that she can store 2 charges of the ability, but also the fact that the unleashed power is giving you an additional 30 ability haste at level 16. Which it's not a completely correct comparison, but as a very, very crude way to think of it, you could take 30% off that cooldown of 7 seconds and think of it as 4.9 seconds. Plus, you can hold 2 charges, meaning that she'll be able to still launch these balls and chase people down in a consistent manner, almost like a battle mage late in the game.
Yeah, that's absolutely true what you're saying. But similar to where we were talking about like Rise and Nasus and stuff, the pace of the game now, getting to level 16, that is a hell of a long time to wait to get your Q to have the same rough DPS that it had for 10 years. You know?
It is, and that's absolutely true. I'm not taking anything away from that. But at the same time, those level 16 fights, mean almost everything in League now. They mean more than ever. There's more potential to come back if you got behind early with the objective bounties. And, the death timers are longer than they've ever been when you have these, like, 32-minute team fights. So, for the fact that she is scaling that hard, I think this is actually net positive in power for her. I think she's going to be a terror. The other thing we didn't really talk about was particularly the changes to Scatter the Weak. Or, sorry, were we going through one by one, or were we just talking about her in general?
I was kind of going one by one.
Oh, okay. I'll save that for Scatter the Weak then.
All right, well, I'm not gonna go over every single one of these numbers instead. I'll just kind of talk about Force of Will and Scatter of the Week. Now, there are some love here for sure, like where she just got the flat bonus true damage from having 5 points in Force of Will. The fact that they gave this an AAP ratio is definitely really nice. In the late game, this is definitely going to the fact that it doesn't just do the full damage, but another like 15% on top of that, and it can scale to like probably 22 and a half, imagine, when she's at full build or something like that. That is going to be impactful. But like I said with the other change, this is a really, really late game scenario, especially if you're maxing Scatter the Weak second. And with that being said, if any of us have like played against Syndra, the one thing you know is her stun is dummy hard to dodge and it's dummy easy to land. And it's super frustrating. I've been playing forever, and it's just impossible almost. It's super if you just line it up right, it's super hard to dodge without flashing or anything. They have to more miss it than you have to hit it. But they did kind of clamp down on that a bit. It'll still be pretty good, but they did make it a little bit harder in terms of like collision and radius and degrees and angles and all this crazy shit.
Right, and you also can't cheese it by starting your scatter and then putting the sphere down.
Yeah, so that'll probably cut down by like a quarter of a second or something. And then,
How do you like these?
yeah,
Yeah, no, I've eaten that Cinder Stun 10,000 times, knowing it was coming, and like still got like, yep, that's what I wanted to happen.
I have fun.
Say it, but yeah, I think maybe it'll separate maybe the casual Syndra players from the serious Syndra players, that their early game will be so much weaker, but once they develop the ability to like, grind the splinters, it might change early itemization, what you're building out the gate for the first, your first back or whatever. But yeah, obviously late game, yeah, if all these numbers add together, multiplicative even, yeah, her team fight potential is crazy nuts at the end. But yeah, I do wonder how well the mediocre to lower skilled Cinder plays, because she's not easy to play as far as mages go. So we'll see, I guess.
As a lower skilled Syndra player myself, I used to still be able to hit the Scatter of the Weak all the time and be like, wow, really, I hit that? But yeah, I'm a terrible Syndra player. I've probably like gone KD positive on her like once. I do think that this scatter angle increasing, almost doubling and then almost tripling once you have the enough shards, is going to, or splinters, is going to actually be a pretty big thing. It means that if you lay down the balls around a team fight well, you'll be able to create a really impressive zone of control that enemies won't be able to just kind of dash into. In addition to that, if you have enough splinters, you're also going to be slowing enemies for 70% after they recover from the stun, which is really cool. It's going to help you chase down people a lot easier, kind of after they start trying to limp away from the fight.
Yeah, it sounds good when you explain it like that, but I've actually played like a lot of Syndra like in the old days, and the idea that you get that like beautiful like Faker or Bjergsen setup where you toss all the spheres out after you ult someone. The big
Yeah,
thing to keep in mind there is you have to actually ult someone to get that huge setup. That's not something
yeah,
you can just preempt and dump them all on the floor because they'll all start timing out really fast. You only make one of those moves like one out of every like 10 or 20 games where you already had a bunch, then you ult someone, then the position has to be like really juicy, and then they'd go in like all a bunch of different directions and you look awesome. That's really not a consistent playstyle thing that she can do.
I agree. It's not so much about stunning 3 or 4 people at once, but about having the threat to stun anyone anywhere, which I think is nice to have when you're trying to kind of control the team fights.
All right, now let's move on to some kind of pros and cons here. The bad news is the most important thing basically in her kit, her like potential with like 3 spheres and then a maximum of 7 spheres, lost a ton of burst damage. But then the upside, they added this silly ergot like effect where she just straight up executes someone if they get hit by any of the spheres while being below 50% health if she collects like 85% of the total splinters, which I imagine is probably going to take her like 20 minutes of 25 minutes of game time to get all those or something, because that sounds about right. So, yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, it's a hell of a payoff, and she does have trouble like 100 to zeroing people, kind of. Like, she needs a lot of setup, and this is just going to really help her in the late game, but I'm not really concerned about her late game. I look at this and I just see that her early game turning into like dog shit. What do you think, Nate?
Yeah, I have the same kind of consensus we've been talking about, that I just fear for her early game. But yeah, late game, and there's so many team fights. You guys know that, like, you see people like limping off with like a bar of health, and you're like, oh my god. But like, Cinder's in the fight. It's like, no, they're all fucking dead. Like, they're all gone. They're all gone. There's tombstones everywhere. So like that's cool. Like it's like kind of scary, kind of like ooh. And I'm sure the first time I get hit by an 84-degree Splinters of Wrath, I'll be very confused. But
Mhm.
yeah, I the same thing that Chris said, that the early game, I wonder how difficult it will be or how much of an adjustment it'll be.
Yeah, it's just with the prevalent of like, assassins you see almost like every time mid, you're always like leaning against things like Yasuo, Yone, Zed, Fizz, Echo. You see that stuff honestly more often now than you see the standard mages that there's a lot more of. And this is
Yeah.
just gonna make her like really be riding the struggle bus.
Oh yeah, against something like a Talon, yeah, she's gonna struggle. So there's actually one thing that I didn't check here. Maybe you can give the PA for me. If any ball hits her while she had below 15% health when that ball started to hit, that'll be the execute, or can it be after the last ball hits, leaves them below 15% and
I'm
executes?
I'm almost positive that if the last one just leaves them below 15, then it executes. It wouldn't really be much point if only the first one did it.
Oh, right. But I guess yeah. So it's definitely not the first one because then you would need a champ with like 5,000 HP for it to not kill them anyway. But I'm saying when the last ball goes in and they're above 15% health when the last ball is about to hit, and then that ball takes them below 15% health, does that execute?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's how it would
I
work.
would
It
think
does.
so. Yeah,
Okay, that's actually
because
disgusting
the
then.
because
That's
the balls hit
basically
pretty
getting a
hard.
free.
So yeah, the idea that
I
if they
mean,
were
if you,
already if they were below 15 before it hit them, it'd probably just kill them anyway or get really close. You know, especially lower health champs.
Not necessarily. Each ball is only doing what 170 plus maybe about 130 to 200 for the AP.
Yeah,
And you
yeah.
think maybe
I
an
guess
average champ has maybe 3,000 HP at that level?
The thing is, now she's more dependent on getting up to this point where she has the execute now that they nerfed all of the base numbers, basically.
Man,
Mm-hmm.
if it leaves you with 15% or less and executes you, that's basically giving you like an extra 450 bonus damage on this skill at max rank, with 100 splinters. That's insane.
Yeah, it's really good. I'm not. It'll
I
be the
wonder how
dream.
what's the rune or talent, the Soul Harvest, the one that hits you when you get
Dark
low
Harvest,
anyway?
yeah.
Dark
Dark
Harvest, yeah,
Harvest.
like if depending how that stacks, that ordering, Like you could definitely get deleted because
Holy shit! Yeah.
with my life as brand support now. Yeah, I just dunk people with that sometimes, and I'm just like, oh man, I didn't realize I had that up to like hundreds of extra damage.
Think about
So,
brand support. It can be so good. You have to play like a total bitch.
oh yeah, yeah.
If you play like a Chad, you're gonna get crushed.
Yeah.
But
So
but yeah, for Syndra, I always like to pose this question to Chris. Yeah, I want Nate to, whenever they do a rework or introduce a new champ, try to describe them in 2 words. I would almost describe it as Veigar-esque hyperscaler.
you got anything to add to that one, Nate?
2 words for Syndra.
Describe the new Syndra in 2
The new
words.
Syndra. Ooh, oh man. That's tough. I'll think about it. I'll come back around. I'll simmer on that for a little bit. I'll come back around to it.
Chrissy, give us your answer.
Lacking early.
That's also true. All right, we got our boy Tom Kench next, I think.
Yeah. On to Tom Kench, and this is I guess goes back to what you were saying, where you were kept saying that they want all of the tanks to not be tanks or something like that. Except I feel like in this case, it's not really going to catch on, no matter how silly these changes get, because AP just removes too much of his inherent strength, like in his W and his on-hit magic damage and the heal from his Q. To go into like an AP build, you would just negate so much of his current strength. So even if they make this stuff as silly as Shyvana, he'll be just infinitely more useful with his like standard like top or support builds.
Yeah, I think that tongue lash maybe just for harass, like in lane or people aim as support. But even then, you don't build AP, so yeah, it's not like they increase the base damage on any of them or anything. So I don't think it'll show a lot of return. I would like to submit Rip for Tom Kench's old ult, which was when we were talking about uselessly hard ults to do. He might have been the crown king of all of that at one point in League.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
and relied on your teammate actually doing it correctly too.
Yep, and you had to click like 42 times for it to actually go anywhere.
Yeah.
Actually,
yeah.
It's like I'm still clicking. I'm still
yeah.
clicking. I'm still clicking. I'm coming. And the range wasn't even far enough to matter until the 3rd rank. Yeah, it was a real treat.
I thought they did a good job with a little mini rework a while back.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I don't mind it, but I feel like the rework completely pushed him out of support now that his like shutdown ability is his ultimate.
Yeah, I still occasionally see him support, and I think these changes, I mean, because these AP ratios are kind of bonkers. I agree with you that they might not push him out of, being a full tank. I'm sure some people will try it where they shouldn't, but as far as like the support Tom Kench, building something like Relic Shield at the very least, he's gonna get a little bit of AP. So this will help support Tom Kench a little bit, even if he's, trying to go full tank.
I guess so.
Again, I still bring up the question: why are we encouraging bad habits? You want to make Tom Kench a little bit better. Why not just increase his ratios or his bonus health scalings just a bit? I don't really get that, but it's crazy to think that the Abyssal Dive, which you can use like once every like 10 seconds, has a 100% AP ratio, now 125%, and it's still better to build him full tank.
Yeah, the cooldown on that gets reduced if you hit somebody.
Yeah. And it's not hard to hit people with that unless they have blinks.
What do you think, Nate?
Yeah, same thing. I always play him as a tank. I don't know if I've ever built him for damage other than maybe like, increasing his auto attack rate, just to get the fish icon up faster. Just when you see, it's kind of like top level team fights where Tom Kench shows up with, 5 trillion health, and then the shield is also building, and he's just walking around auto attacking everybody in the middle. It's such a threat versus Glass Cannon. Tom Kench sounds like a terrible idea. Like you're just, going to make your team mad, and maybe pick a champ every once in a while and then just get deleted otherwise, because it's not like he's fast, and he's very large model, so dodging things, not as easy.
Yeah,
so,
a lot similar to the AP Malphite arguments.
Yep, pretty much.
Agreed.
Okay, next up we have Twitch, and this is exactly like the AP Shyvana silliness, except this is almost silliness to like the nth degree almost. Because this, like, I've seen this build, people try to pull off this build many times now, and this is like an absolute sack of like the laning phase in the early game to try to pull off the most cheesy shit humanly possible. This isn't like magic damage on hit. This is like a pathetic like dot that he has to work up over game, and then he gets like this massive payoff where if he gets all the stacks, he can bomb it for the expunge. But this is even it's just so stupid, and I can't believe they're encouraging this. It's so stupid.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never seen someone succeed. I've never seen someone like pull it off. It's a lot like just watching people play Teemo, where it's like, man, that guy's obnoxious, but you're really, just playing a 4v5 because you're not going to bring it. So yeah, the AP Twitch, I'm just like, please don't. Like, at least build 50-50. Like, no.
I've actually seen the AP ratio, the AP Twitch work a bunch of times in my games. It can be a terror early. It can put out more damage than you would think. Then mid and late game, yeah, you're a little bit more of a liability, unless you can somehow get all those stacks off. And I would rather see my Twitch build AD for sure, but the AP has a somewhat similar play style in terms of what it's doing. It's not like Shyvana where you're moving at a different distance, working with different timing windows. You're kind of trying to do the same things that you would normally do with Twitch. You're just doing it with the damage coming from different places. I don't know why this is the place that they felt like they needed to buff Twitch. Maybe they just want AP Twitch to be a thing, and they felt like the regular AD Twitch didn't need any type of buffs. I don't particularly understand what the intention is here.
Yeah,
It's probably just to make AP Twitch a thing because they like it.
This patch is just kind of like Weirdo's choice, honestly.
Yeah.
When I
Yeah.
think about it.
Yeah, these are not particularly big buffs though. Like, I don't think it's even gonna mean a ton for people trying to pull off the AP build.
Okay, our last champ is the reworked Udyr. Have you seen a lot of this, Nate?
I've seen a bunch of Udyrs. He still runs at me and stuns me, so I never really played Udyr. I've maybe played him like 3 times in my entire life across the last decade. So he still does what he's always done to me. I guess I didn't know that he had all these like newfangled changes.
Well, I'm actually been a huge fan of the rework, and I really was a big fan of the old Udyr top. And this one is basically just vintage Udyr, but just a lot of like kind of icing and power in some other places that he didn't have it before. But I do think overall it was a massively successful rework and one of the best reworks they ever did, in my opinion. But
that's high price.
Yeah, it looks so good, and they got rid of so much of his goofiness, and he's just kind of really well rounded and feels good.
Thematically, they did a wonderful job.
Yeah.
Thematically, like 10 out of 10.
Alright, so let's get down to these changes. It isn't really much here. They kind of helping out lane Udyr here with giving him back some love where he can heal off the minions, because that was pretty bad. Even against champions, his turtle stance has already been nerfed like a few times, so giving him back some of his sustain against minions is pretty nice. At the same time, they're kind of cutting back or doing something goofy with his damage of Phoenix versus minions, because I guess his clear is funny at certain times. But yeah, pretty modest changes here. What do you think, Nate?
Yeah, like I said, I don't play a lot of Udyr, but the like I said, the laning effect that he could be a little more substantial instead of just being relegated to jungle for all times is good. Gives you more options that are not AP Twitch, AP Malphite options.
Yeah, I feel like when the Udyr rework came out and we were previewing the changes. And I was saying R is absolutely ridiculously overpowered now, and the only one that people should be going for. First of all, I was right, but second of all, so was almost everybody else on the planet. Like it was already a cold take by that point. And this is the 3rd time in a row, I believe, that they have given buffs to the Q and nerfs to the R. Now, in fairness, these are very small and narrowly focused changes. This is all about Lane Udyr and giving him the reason to build Q rather than R in some circumstances. And like you said, Chrissy, giving him a little bit more sustain in lane with the better heal against minions on W. So yeah, this is basically just making it a little bit more valuable to build the Q as opposed to the R in lane. Given the great wave clear the R gives you, however, and given that in the early levels they actually made the wave clear a little bit better for Udyr, worse at the later levels. Yeah, I think that you're still going to want to build R as lane or Udyr rather than Q in almost all circumstances.
No, man. I've always been a Tiger boy, and man, his Q is more feisty than ever, man. It is absolutely it's getting to cheese factors of health shred levels. It's just so crazy. I completely agree. Phoenix is the better tank build, but for like a middle of the ground like off tank, Tiger it's just unbeatable. The damage, the 1v1 is insane with Tiger.
It's a lot.
Yeah, and I mean, using the awakened form of it will, it's going to be a lot less likely that you use it on the minions and they survive with 3 health, and your minion just finishes them off and you lose the gold now. I just think you're such a Q stan though, for a champion that really, until they give him another like 6 buffs on it, should still be building R.
Nah, just wait. You're gonna have one of these games where you just get like absolutely deleted by like a guy that's not even building that much attack damage, but he's going like Q max. You just wait.
Oh, I'm still waiting for it, but I've seen a lot of Udyrs with R run the game.
Okie dokie, that brings us to the end of the champions, and then we have one item change, but it's not much. The biggest thing to take away is that the lethality actually dropped more than the attack damage, which is pretty concerning because this is a pretty mainstay mythic, not just for assassins, but for a lot of ranged attack damage people as well. Have you built this a lot, Nate?
I've been playing in the old days, I guess, when I played more attacky champs. But I play a ton of support now, or just Beefcake's top lane. So no, but yeah, the lethality drop I think is definitely significant for a 580 bump. So yeah, see how it goes. See, I don't think it'll make anybody not build it though. I don't think it'll push it out or anything.
I agree. I think this is a very small nerf. The way that lethality works, it's not like a full armor pen, and so it's really, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4% off on average. Through the different points in the game. For your physical damage versus the 5 extra AD that you're getting, might be an extra 2-3%. On most skills versus autos. It's probably a very, very slight nerf to Eclipse, and if Eclipse was fitting well into your build, you should probably keep building it.
All right. Well, that does it for 12.19. We won't talk about this meaningless Jhin change. It's kind of just a stylistic
40% bonus.
Stylistic shenanigans.
Yep.
To match his little goofy number theme.
Sending you over to 4444 Edge of Extinction Drive.
And I just like to say I'm really happy we could get you to do this with us, Nate, and I hope somewhere down the line we can grab you again for another one of these.
Yeah, I'm down. Evenings are good, so yeah. Let me know, and I'll let you know.
It was super enjoyable. Hope to have you back on, man.
Appreciate it.
All right. We'll see you with 12.20, guys.